The door creaked open on rusty hinges, groaning against the silence that gripped the saloon. Wind howled through the empty spaces in Red Hollow, kicking dust through the cracks beneath the warped floorboards. Smoke from stale cigars curled in the still air, frozen mid-drift as every set of eyes, old drunks, card cheats, cowhands, and killers, turned toward the threshold. She stood there like death had walked upright. Her dress clung in tatters to her frame, soaked in dried blood, the lower hem shredded as if dragged through thorns. Her boots, one missing a sole, left tracks of mud and something darker across the warped wooden floor. A rifle rested across her back, slung like a soldier's last hope. A revolver, dull but loaded, hung low on her hip. Her hair, once golden perhaps, was matted with sweat and crimson. One eye was bruised, her lips split, but her stare never wavered. Ice. Steel. Something older than revenge. No one spoke. The piano player let a note hang, hands suspended mid-chord. A poker hand slipped from someone's fingers, cards fluttering to the floor like dead leaves. Behind the bar, Cyrus, the saloon owner, known for breaking men's teeth with the butt of a shotgun, froze, jaw slack. She took 3 steps forward. "Whiskey," she said, voice dry as desert bones. No one moved. "I said, whiskey." Cyrus blinked and fumbled for the bottle. The glass clinked as he poured, sloshing more than he meant to. She took it without thanks, tilted it back, and winced as it scorched down her throat. A grizzled man at the far end stood slowly. His spurs sang against the floor. You looking for someone, miss?" She set the glass down and turned. "Yeah." He studied her. "You got a name?" "I had one." She stepped closer. "But today, you can call me Clara." A murmur rippled through the room. Not many women carried rifles into Red Hollow. Fewer walked out again. She looked at the man. "You know Cole Branton?" The name dropped like dynamite in a mine shaft. The man shifted. "Might have heard of him." "What's it to you?" "I heard he runs cattle through here. Heard he burned a house north of the ridge 6 days ago. Shot a man in the throat. Left a boy in the fire." The man's face paled. I wouldn't know about that. Folks don't ask questions around Branton." Clara's voice didn't rise. "Didn't need to." "Well, I do." Outside, the wind shrieked and rattled the shutters. Thunder rumbled far off, mountain storms rolling in. Behind her, the memories did too. The house had been small but warm, timbers packed tight, herbs hanging in the kitchen, a fiddle resting on the mantel. Her husband, Eli, was chopping wood when she saw the smoke. Her boy, Jonah, 5 years old, had just picked up a wooden horse she'd carved the night before. The dog barked first. She turned. The horizon boiled black. Riders. No warning. No flag. Just fire and guns. She grabbed Jonah, shouted for Eli, but he was already running toward the barn. The first bullet took the dog. The second, Eli. She didn't see which one fired it, only the grinning man with a snake tattoo who threw the lantern into the window. She ran with Jonah into the woods, but he was coughing too hard, too scared. The smoke got him before she could dig far enough into the roots. She buried him that night with her bare hands. No shovel. No prayer. Just a single word carved on the oak tree above him, justice. It rained the next morning. She walked barefoot until her feet bled, found a passing wagon, stole a coat, and kept walking. Hunger clawed her gut. Pain hollowed her out. But rage kept her breathing. Now she was here. Now she wanted names. The saloon was still frozen. Clara's hand brushed the revolver. "Where's Branton?" she asked again. Cyrus, swallowing hard, gestured east. "Last I heard, he camps near Bitter Creek Canyon. 2 days' ride. But he don't come into town. Sends his boys instead. They wear red kerchiefs, right?" A nod. "I passed 3 by the fork," she said. "Only one rode away." Someone in the back cursed under his breath. "You killed 2 of Branton's men?" the grizzled man asked, voice thin. Clara turned to him, gaze level. "No." She paused. "I killed 3. Just took the last one longer." Another silence. But this one wasn't fear. It was respect. Or maybe awe. She turned back to the bar and poured herself another drink. Her hands shook now, only slightly, but enough for her to brace them against the counter. The adrenaline was draining. From the far corner, a chair creaked. A tall man stood up, broad, dust-covered, eyes like stone. He had the look of someone who'd killed and remembered every face. "You goin' after Branton alone?" he asked. Clara didn't answer. He narrowed his eyes. "You got grit, but you'll die." She glanced at him, then at her drink. "I already did." A few men exchanged glances, the kind that said we've seen too many widows walk into graves, but no one moved to stop her. The tall man took a step forward. "He's got 30 men. Guns. Traps. Hellhounds, they say. You can't outshoot that." Clara's fingers brushed the scar along her collarbone. Then I'll outlast M. The saloon doors banged open again, but this time it was only the wind. Still, everyone jumped. Clara didn't flinch. Outside, the storm was gathering. The sky had turned a dark, roiling gray, clouds scudding like herds across the prairie sky. A few men muttered prayers. She walked to the door and paused. "You tell him I'm coming," she said without turning. "Tell him the fire he lit's still burnin'. Tell him Clara Whitmore walks with ghosts." And then she stepped into the storm. Rain began to fall in sheets, slapping the ground like judgment. Behind her, the saloon whispered. Someone whispered, "She ain't comin' back." Someone else replied, "If Branton's smart, he won't wait for her to." She walked down the center of the road. Lightning cracked across the sky. And in the cliffs beyond the canyon, far past the safe edges of law, a fire glowed. A shadow laughed. But Clara didn't stop. She just kept walking. Into the rain. Into the night. Into war. The canyon wind cut sharp across Clara's face, stinging like the memories she carried in silence. Her horse had gone lame just past Devil's Spine, where the rocks narrowed and the air smelled like iron. She slit its throat with steady hands before the suffering could linger. She left the saddlebags, took what she needed, her rifle, her revolver, a strip of jerky, the bullet with Branton's name carved into it, and kept walking. The land didn't care about her mission. The trees didn't mourn her son. The sky above Bitter Creek Canyon rolled on, uncaring and cloudless. The sun had no mercy, only heat. That evening, Clara found shelter beneath an overhang of shale and driftwood twisted into a low wall by the wind. She built a fire small enough to hide, but big enough to keep the chill away. Coyotes howled in the distance, and she didn't sleep. When the first shot rang out, it split the silence like bone. She ducked, rolled behind the fire pit, and drew her revolver. A second shot hissed past her cheek. She counted the echoes. 3 shooters, spread out. Bandits. Branton's men. Or worse, scavengers, hungry for whatever a lone woman might carry. They didn't know she wasn't easy meat. She exhaled slowly and waited. Another movement, a boot crunching gravel. She fired once, low. A grunt followed, then silence. The others panicked. One charged in from the left. She pivoted, took aim, but before she could fire, a second gunshot sounded from the ridge above. The man fell forward, face first into the fire. The flame sputtered. The third man turned to run but didn't get far. An arrow, smooth and silent, punched through his shoulder, dropping him with a scream that bled into the night. Clara stood still, pistol raised, body tense and blood singing with adrenaline. Then she saw him. A figure stepped from the trees. Tall. Broad shoulders. A rifle slung across his back, but it wasn't what he held that caught her eye, it was what he didn't say. He wore the colors of the earth, faded buckskin, dark wool, leather worn by time. His hair was long, braided down one side, tied with a red thread. His face was carved from patience, hard as stone, with eyes that seemed to carry every death they'd ever witnessed. He said nothing. Not even as he walked past her, checked each of the dead men, then began to gather wood as if she weren't even there. "Who are you?" Clara asked. No answer. He built the fire higher. Cooked meat she hadn't seen him gather. Saturday. 8. She didn't move. "You followed me?" she asked. Still nothing. "I didn't need help." A glance from him, not dismissive, but quiet. Knowing. As if he'd heard the claim 100 times and buried each one in the ground. "You with Branton?" He shook his head once. "Then who the hell are you?" He looked at her, then pointed toward the rising moon. She didn't understand. He didn't explain. They sat in silence for hours. She didn't sleep again, not fully. But he did, one eye open, back to the rocks. At dawn, he was gone. She followed the tracks out of instinct more than purpose. They were neat, deliberate, too clean for any white man she'd known. She trailed him through cedar breaks and shadowed gullies. Once, she found a rabbit skinned and left beside a rock. A quiet offering. She took it. 2 days passed. She stopped trying to talk. He kept reappearing, when she nearly stepped into a rattlesnake's nest, when she slipped near a crumbling ledge. He never announced himself. Never asked questions. But his presence lingered like the scent of firewood on wool. On the 3rd day, Clara collapsed. The fever had crept in from the bullet graze along her ribs, the one she'd ignored after the canyon fight. Infection bloomed like wildfire in her bloodstream. The world spun, colors bleeding into each other. She crawled beneath a cedar and waited to either wake or never rise again. When she did wake, it was to the warmth of a fire, a bitter taste on her tongue, and the sound of water dripping into a pot. Her shirt had been cut away, the wound cleaned and bound. She shot upright, dizzy. He sat nearby, mending his bowstring. "You drugged me," she rasped. He didn't answer. "You could have left me to die." He kept his eyes on the thread. Why didn't you? Finally, he looked up. His voice was low. Gravel soft. Too many already dead. It was the first thing he'd said. She blinked. You speak English? He nodded once. Name? Gray Elk. She waited for more. None came. He fed her broth, helped her sit, but never touched her longer than needed. His hands were calloused but careful. Later that night, as the fire danced and owls called from the trees, Clara asked him why he stayed near her. He answered only, Branton took from you. And from you? His eyes flickered. The fire reflected a lifetime of grief. Yes. There were no details. No story. But in his silence, she heard everything. The way his jaw clenched at the name. The way his hand lingered near the hilt of his blade. Pain needed no language. In the days that followed, they traveled together, not as companions, but as survivors orbiting the same star of vengeance. She learned to watch the ground as he did, to read tracks in dust, signs in broken branches. He taught her how to breathe steady when aiming, how to move without sound. He never said why he helped. She never asked again. Once, they came upon a clearing where wildflowers bloomed in spite of the drought. She reached to pick one. He stopped her with a gesture. Why? She whispered. Let it grow. He didn't smile, but something softened in his face. That night, under stars sharp enough to cut skin, she offered him the carved bullet. This was meant for Branton, she said. But if I fall, promise me it finds its mark. He looked at it. Took it gently. Didn't speak. Then handed it back. You won't fall. She wanted to believe him. The next morning, as they broke camp near the canyon ridge, Clara noticed something different in him. His eyes scanned the distance slower. His shoulders tense. He pointed to the horizon. Smoke. Branton's camp. Close. Her pulse quickened. We're not ready, she said. Gray Elk simply stared. We'll die, she added. He glanced to the side. Maybe. But you'll go? He nodded once. Then so will I. They walked in silence for a long time after that, no more words needed. They weren't allies. Not yet. But they were two ghosts moving toward the man who'd killed their pasts. Each step forward was one closer to blood. The wind howled through the canyon again. And neither of them turned back. The canyon narrowed like a clenched jaw, steep walls of red rock pressing inward, casting long, jagged shadows in the late afternoon sun. Clara moved in silence, one step behind Gray Elk, her rifle slung across her back, her hand always near the grip of her revolver. The path they followed wasn't a road, it was a sliver of trail carved by water and forgotten time, winding through dry creek beds and sun-scorched scrub. Bitter Creek Canyon had once been a trading route, before Branton's men turned it into a noose. Now, whispers called it the Canyon of Ghosts, where men entered and were never seen again. The bones of wagons still lay rusting at the mouth, overgrown with thistle and memory. Gray Elk paused at the top of a ridge, kneeling low. He pointed two fingers outward. Smoke. Clara followed his gaze. Nestled in the crook of the canyon was Branton's camp, a semicircle of tents and wagons, guarded by a dozen men with rifles and rough laughter. A corral of stolen horses stood beside a cook fire. Beyond that, the canyon wall rose sharp and unforgiving. There was no back exit. A trap disguised as a camp. She exhaled slowly. He's down there. Gray Elk didn't answer. He studied the wind, the way the smoke curled and fell. She watched him, realizing that over the last few days, she'd begun to match his stillness. Where once she rushed to speak, now she waited. Where once she demanded answers, now she read the quiet between them. Her gaze drifted across the camp. Among the men, she spotted a familiar face, the one with the snake tattoo, grinning beside the cookpot. The same man who threw the lantern into her window. Her hands clenched into fists before she realized it. Gray Elk touched her shoulder. A single word, low and quiet. Not yet. She nodded, jaw tight. They set camp a mile west, beneath a limestone shelf where the sound of the wind masked their movements. That night, they planned. Gray Elk sketched lines in the dirt with a stick, mapping the guard patterns, the weak points, the spots where visibility dropped. Clara marked each man she recognized from that night, the ones who had laughed while her world burned. She could barely sleep. The firelight danced across the stone above her head, and her eyes stayed open long after Gray Elk drifted into his meditative half-rest. Her thoughts wandered, not to vengeance, but to Jonah's smile. To Eli's steady hand on her shoulder when the storms came. She had come for blood. But what would be left when it spilled? At dawn, they broke camp and approached the canyon in silence. Their breath was white in the cold. A late frost clung to the grass, crunching underfoot. They were nearly to the ledge when they saw him, a boy, maybe 13, stumbling through the brush, face pale, clothes torn, one leg dragging behind him. Clara rushed to him before Gray Elk could stop her. The boy collapsed in her arms. Help, he rasped. Please. Gray Elk knelt, turning the boy over gently. A bullet grazed his thigh, fresh. Clara tore a strip from her undershirt and tied it tight. The boy winced but didn't cry. Who are you? She asked. Jesse. I ran. Branton said, he said he'd feed me to the pigs if I spoke out. Clara looked at Gray Elk. His face was unreadable, but his hand drifted to his knife. No, she said. He's just a kid. He's Branton's, Gray Elk replied. He's running. Not far enough. Clara stood between them, her voice low but firm. You save him, or you kill me next. Gray Elk held her gaze for a long moment. Then, slowly, he sheathed the blade. They moved the boy to a hollow beneath the rocks, hidden from the camp. Gray Elk left a strip of meat and water. Jesse clutched Clara's hand. Are you going to kill him? The boy asked. Clara didn't answer. She only stood. As the sun rose higher, they made their final approach. Gray Elk led them along a forgotten game trail that skirted the outer edge of the camp. They moved like shadows, each footstep measured, each breath deliberate. The silence was deafening. At noon, Clara watched from the cliffs as Branton stumbled from his tent, drunk, shirt open, gun slung low. He laughed as he threw another photograph into the fire, one of the many he'd taken from the homes his men raided. She didn't need to see which it was. She knew. Gray Elk passed her a small pouch. Inside, 2 sticks of dynamite, black powder, and fuse. He pointed toward the supply wagon. Clara nodded. They worked together, crawling through the brush, planting the charges near the wheels, timing the fuse to the shift change at sunset. As they finished, she paused by a broken barrel, staring at the bloodstains on its edge. A child's toy lay beside it, a wooden horse. Burned at one end. Her heart stopped. Jonah's. She picked it up slowly, hands trembling. The rage surged again. But not wild. Focused. Cold. They retreated just as the guards rotated, slipping back toward the higher ground. From there, they waited. Night fell like a curtain. The camp below flickered with orange glow and careless laughter. Drunken songs drifted up the canyon walls. Shadows danced around the fire pit. Clara checked her revolver. Gray Elk notched an arrow. She looked at him. You ever been in love? He didn't answer at first. Then, softly, yes. What happened? He pulled the bowstring tight. Branton. They waited another minute. Then Clara touched the match to the fuse. It hissed. Sparked. Slithered toward vengeance. The explosion tore through the silence with a roar that echoed for miles. Flames leapt from the supply wagon, sending men screaming into the dark. The horses reared and broke free. Tents collapsed. Shouts overlapped as panic replaced bravado. In the chaos, Clara stood. And walked into the fire. Branton's men saw her too late. She moved like the storm she had walked through days ago, swift, unrelenting. The first man raised his rifle. She dropped him with a single shot. Another charged from the side. Gray Elk's arrow took him through the chest before he could scream. She moved through the camp with the fury of memory and the precision of training. She didn't waste bullets. Didn't speak. Only fired, stepped, reloaded. Then she saw him. Branton, standing near the wreckage of his tent, blood on his coat, disbelief in his eyes. He saw her. And he smiled. Well, I'll be damned, he muttered. Clara raised her gun. He didn't run. He lifted his revolver. They fired at the same time. The bullet grazed her shoulder, spun her sideways. Hers punched into his thigh. He screamed, dropped, rolled, scrambled behind the fire pit. His men were down or scattered. The camp was a ruin. Clara stumbled forward. And Branton laughed. You think this changes anything? He spat, voice thick with blood and liquor. You think burning my camp brings your family back? She leveled the revolver. I don't want them back, she said. I want you gone. The gun clicked. Empty. Branton lunged forward. But before he could reach her, a shadow dropped from the ridge, Gray Elk, blade drawn, silent as the wind. The knife met flesh. Branton choked, buckled, and fell into the fire. Flames roared. Clara didn't look away. Smoke curled into the stars. The canyon fell silent again, as if the land itself exhaled. She stood there, her body trembling, not from fear, but from the weight lifting, piece by piece. Gray Elk wiped his blade clean and stepped back. She turned toward him. Why didn't you kill him earlier? He met her eyes. Because that was yours to decide. And for the first time, she nodded, not as survivor, not as widow. But as herself. Clara Whitmore. The woman who walked into ghosts, and walked out again. In the hollow where the boy Jesse waited, a new fire flickered. And in the distance, Red Hollow awaited her return. The sky cracked open with a flash of lightning as Clara stepped into the ruined camp, smoke curling around her boots like spirits rising from the dead. Branton's men were scattered, some crawling through ash, others sprawled motionless where fire or steel had found them. The scent of gunpowder mingled with the sting of blood and the sharp tang of burned canvas. Her shoulder bled from the graze, her ribs screamed with every step, but her hand stayed steady. The revolver was empty, but she reloaded without looking down, movements practiced, calm, deliberate. The weight in her chest hadn't lifted with Branton's fall. If anything, it settled deeper. Revenge was no cure. It was only a door, and now it had swung open. She passed the edge of the fire pit where Branton's body lay crumpled, his limbs twisted, his face half-burned and unrecognizable. But the ring on his left hand still shone. She paused. The same ring that had gleamed as he dragged Jonah's horse from the rubble. The same hand that had lit the fire that ended her life as she knew it. Gray Elk approached from the shadows, silent as ever. His face was streaked with soot, his expression unreadable. In his hands, he held the boy Jesse, now conscious, bruised but alive. The child looked between them, at the ruins, at Branton's corpse, at Clara. "He's dead?" Jesse asked, voice barely audible over the hiss of dying flames. Clara nodded. "Does that mean we can go home?" She crouched slowly, ignoring the pain in her legs. "Do you have a home to go to?" Jesse looked away. "Not anymore." Clara's throat tightened. "Then we make one." Gray Elk didn't speak, but she saw something shift in his eyes. Not approval. Not affection. Something deeper. Recognition. They buried the bodies at dawn, those who deserved it. The others they left to the canyon. Clara took Jonah's burned wooden horse from her coat and placed it on the highest ridge, facing the sun. She didn't cry. Not because she couldn't, but because there was nothing left to mourn. What had died was buried long ago. What remained was purpose. By midday, they were riding. 3 horses scavenged from Branton's stolen corral. Jesse rode with Gray Elk, arms wrapped around his waist, head resting against his back. Clara rode ahead, leading them down the broken path out of the canyon. The land felt different now, lighter, somehow. Not cleansed, not forgiven, but quieter. The wind carried no screams today. When they reached the fork in the road, Clara pulled her horse to a stop. Ahead lay Red Hollow, and beyond it, nothing but dust and memory. She turned in the saddle, looking back at Gray Elk. "What now?" she asked. He dismounted. "Help Jesse down. Now we see who we are without hate." Clara swallowed. "And who are you?" He glanced toward the east, toward lands he hadn't seen in years. A man learning to be more than his scars. She looked at the boy. "And Jesse?" Gray Elk smiled, just barely. "A future neither of us expected." She looked toward Red Hollow. She hadn't expected to return. Not alive. Not with purpose. The town hadn't changed. Same crooked signs. Same leaning steeple. But the eyes watching from the windows were different. Word traveled faster than wagons. When Clara rode in, they didn't stare in silence this time. They nodded. Some removed their hats. Cyrus, the saloon keeper, stood on the porch and offered her a bottle of water instead of whiskey. "You come back whole?" he asked. She took the water. "No. You come back better?" She looked down the street, where children chased each other between wagons, where dogs barked and horses brayed, and for a moment, the town didn't feel haunted. "No," she said. "But I came back with a beginning." He nodded. "That's more than most." They took up lodging in the abandoned schoolhouse. Clara swept out the dust, mended the windows. Jesse slept curled up in the corner, arms wrapped around a stray mutt who followed them in. Gray Elk carved a new bough from driftwood and taught the boy how to track rabbits. One night, under a pale sky thick with stars, Clara stood at the edge of town, her fingers tracing the bullet she'd once carved Branton's name into. She hadn't fired it. She never would. Some weights didn't belong in other men's graves, they stayed with you, whether you liked it or not. Gray Elk stood beside her. They watched the horizon in silence. "You regret not killing him yourself?" he asked. "No," she said. "But I regret needing to." He nodded. Was there ever another way? Clara thought of the fire. The screams. The boy in her arms. The hollow in her chest. "Not for me." The stars blinked overhead like silent witnesses. "You leaving soon?" she asked. He shrugged. "Maybe. Maybe not." She looked at him. "You still got ghosts?" He didn't answer. She smiled. "I guess we both do." He turned to her then, and for the first time, he truly looked at her, not as a weapon, not as a broken widow, but as a woman who had walked through fire and didn't burn away. "You're not who you were," he said. "No," she replied. "But I'm someone now." He offered a hand. Not in farewell. In understanding. She took it. In Red Hollow, the saloon played music again. The children sang. The graves on the hill grew flowers, untended but blooming all the same. And Clara Whitmore, bloodied, battered, and reborn, walked into town not as a legend, not as a ghost, but as a woman who had found her way through violence, and back into her own skin. Vengeance had opened the door, but redemption walked her home. If you found this story worth the telling, don't let it fade into the dust. Like it. Share it. Subscribe for more tales from the edge of history, where courage still whispers through canyon winds, and legends are born in silence and fire.